All right, so this video is designed to kind of give you a formal introduction to who I am, my background, where I come from, how I started my journey, how we got to where we are now. I just kind of want to put it all out there so you guys can kind of get to understand why we have the mission we have and where it came from. Okay, so first you're going to notice that you hear me call myself Ms Valerie and my puppies friends all the time. This is because I was an educator for almost 30 years. I specialized in early childhood development. I was an early childhood development specialist. That means that I worked from everything from Head Start to the private sector to eventually owning schools. I worked with the county and sat on boards and decided where money was going to go with First Five. I've had my hands all over the place when it came to child development, really understanding the child's first 5 years of brain development, understanding the impact that happens to our children, where early trauma affects kids, autism, traumatic brain injuries. I've seen it, I've done it, I did it all. My passion was really understanding the brain and how the brain in children develop and then how we can best help those children. While I was professionally working, I had a lot of the county's at-risk and foster kids go through my classroom. Like so many other educators that have this, it's just a matter of time before you take these kids home with you, which is exactly what happened. My husband and I became licensed foster parents. Unaware to us because of my background, CPS had listed us as what's called ISFC, Intensive Services Foster Care. What that meant is the hardest of the hardest children were being sent to us, the kids that were not successful placement in typical homes because of the skill set needed. That right off the bat meant that we were getting a lot of PTSD, complex PTSD and complex trauma, autism. We were getting all sorts of things. But we learned really quickly that one of the biggest tools we had in our home was our resident dogs, our Australian Shepherds at the time. Our Aussies were so gifted at knowing instinctively when to get in, when to get out. They did deep pressure therapy without ever being trained. And that's just kind of where I jumped off the crazy train. I really wanted to know what I can do to raise puppies to best meet the needs of people out there, like the children coming into my home. What could I do? Understanding that I had a background in child development and we are dealing with mammals, really similar concept. So taking those kinds of ideas, I started to do a deep dive in education. I learned about the science of the development of puppies and their brain development. I learned about everything from temperament to environmental genetics. I started to do that. I started networking with other trainers that were training previous puppies I had bred casually. And I started to build a curriculum around the idea of what my goals were. Understanding the hard science that also went into the stages like fright and flight and all these different things that dogs go through, just like human children. They're really similar. So my career crossed over very easily. It took us quite a few years to implement things. The trainers would come in and do a round of testing on puppies and then say, oh, Ms Valerie, we want you to introduce air brakes. Okay, Ms Valerie, we want you to introduce wheelchairs and walkers. And the trainers had a lot of input in how that all happened. I did find an amazing mentor that had about 10 years senior on me, but she also came from an educational background. So she also believed in the hard science and the education behind what we were doing, not just producing puppies for money. Okay, so we're gonna kind of go, we started building this curriculum. The main goal of our curriculum was to really pay attention to the brain development of the puppies as they were growing. So we know for the first 5 years of a human's life, that first 5 years is huge for the success for that child later. We know that if you take a toddler and you put them in a crib and you never sing to them, you never talk to them, you never do anything with them, they're not going to have as much ability in life as the child that had been sung to and read to and just was interacted with. We know that there's a lot that happens in the brain development. Dogs are mammals too. There's a lot of really similar brain function, a lot of the similar parts of the brain that are used for different things, such as emotion and just lots of different comparisons of the way they're physically built too, which is part of why dogs work so well in our species, right, as partners in our world, is because actually their brains are developed really similar. So we started to build a curriculum around looking at those ideas. So the first thing I kind of want to educate everybody on, this is just very basic, but stay with me here. Okay, so if we have a basic brain, human, dog, doesn't matter. It's really similar, mammal, mammal. You have a basic brain. This is your primeval part of your brain that controls your breathing and your heartbeat. This is your fright and flight. This is the scare thing. So every mammal is actually born with a certain number of neurons that are blank or empty. What happens is in very early stages, okay, in humans, it's the first 12 months. In dogs, it's the first few weeks. And what happens with these neurons is every little sensory that they're introduced to, good and bad, is potentially saved in a neuron. So let's say mom's smell is positive, right? And then they hear a little bit of music. They get a gentle touch from a human. All of these little things are saved in the neurons. As they start to grow over the weeks, these neurons connect. But if something negative happens, something scary happens as they're, and this is for humans too, this is where trauma unfolds. So if something big and scary happens in that process of these neurons connecting and the pathways all being put together, they're going to go down into the fright and flight part of the brain. That's the fear factor, right? I'm going to die. And this is how your body protects itself. Eventually, that pathway can build its way back out and then make other connections. As the puppy or the child gets bigger, you've got more complex building in the brain, more problem solving, more awareness to their environment. Lots of stuff starts to connect, right? Where these are the basic building blocks. All of these early intervention things that we're introducing mammals to, children or dogs, are the building blocks to their life. So if there's a negative experience where a human comes running in the room and screaming and yelling, and that in that early neurological stage is being saved, that's a negative that's going to be sent down to the fright and flight. So really how these pathways in the first 14 weeks of a dog's life is built has a lot to do with the full well-rounded dog. So hopefully that makes some sense to you. So what we have done is we have mindfully put the curriculum together. Every puppy in our program has a goal. So every litter that we do has the average of 2 service or therapy dogs per litter. What we do is we typically pre-assign families before the dogs are even bred or right as they're bred. When the puppies are 2 weeks old and I know that they're thriving, we get in contact with that family. Their task needs are assigned to that litter. So for example, if we have an autistic child that throws big loud tantrums, I'm going to have those tantrum sounds in the back of the whelping room as part of my curriculum. So at 2 weeks when the babies are born, those service families are contacted. We go through the task list with our trainers. They put together specialties that they would like to see in the curriculum. I add things. The curriculum is adjusted appropriately and things are added or taken out depending on goals. And then we just hit the ground running. And every single day, there's the set curriculum. We had a simpler version of this years ago, and we just keep improving upon it, right? This simple curriculum is designed to build those pathways. Remember, we talked about we want a really stable dog. We want a dog that doesn't have fear response. We want a dog that isn't sensitive to sight or sound. We want to know which ones have the traits that are unchangeable and changeable. There are a few traits in a dog that are not changeable, such as the energy level, the human focus. You have touch tolerance. You have tenderheartedness. There's a few of them. So we're really mindful to mark that as we're raising the baby so that we're aware of that. At about 7 weeks, depending on the litter and the goals, we have usually 2 different types of temperament testing that we run. The first is a Volhort. Volhort is very specialized for service dogs, and it's run only by our certified trainers. And then we run PAT, or personal assessment test, and that is more specific for the pet homes, and therapy homes. Now, all of my clients are on my list for picking, get a copy of the results, and then they get the videos of us actually running the test so that they can see it. But at the time that all those tests are ran, when we do the Volhort with the trainer, that's when the service family puppies are picked out of the litter. They're completely removed. And then our pet homes, who we rely on to keep the program running, right? We couldn't help our service families without our homes that are willing to take our pet puppies. So the service dogs leave the litter, and then the remainder of the litter is all that information is sent to our pet families, and then they get to come in person and they get to pick their baby, completely educated based off what we know about that dog. So if we do see any potential issues or we do see any weaknesses in the baby, I am not placing the really pretty blue Merle that's a complete crackhead with the older lady that wants to travel in an RV. That's not an appropriate placement. They're totally empowered, and the hope is that the people will not pick off impulse, that they do it. And they usually do. They'll come to my house and they say, okay, Ms Valerie, based off biographies, we only want to see this puppy, and this puppy. And so we really give the puppies a voice. We help to educate and inform families. And of course, we always take extra steps for the health and well-being of all of our dogs, and then honor the needs of both service families and therapy dog and pet homes. All right, there's the basics. If you have any questions, just let me know, but I thought it would be fun to kind of put my background out there. Thanks.